Hello. Welcome back to my Sleepytime Reading channel. If you enjoy my readings, please hit the like button and hit that subscribe so that you can keep up with the new recordings that I come out with. I'm putting myself on a schedule and trying to post every other day, and we'll see if I can stick to that. If not, I'm going to go for at least 2 to 3 times a week. Today we are back with How It Is Made by Archibald Williams. And the subtitle for this is describing in simple language how various machines and many articles in common use are manufactured from the raw materials. And this book came out in 1907, so we're talking late 19th, early 20th century manufacturing. Today's reading has 2 shorter chapters. One is on the building of pianos, and the other is on the bottling of mineral water. And we'll start with the piano chapter. The building of a piano. Handel and his spinet. The materials used in making a piano. Wood piles. Cutting and drying the wood. The joiner's shop. Veneering. A mechanical rubber. The sounding board. The frame. Boring holes for the rest pins, piano strings, the keyboard, covering the hammers with felt, polishing, adjusting, tuning, factory organization. A very pretty little story is told about the boyhood of Handel, the famous composer. Though born a musical genius, he was discouraged from the pursuit of what his father considered to be a contemptible art. But so strong was his passion for music that, with the aid of a kindly aunt, he managed to smuggle a spinet up into the attic. The instrument's feeble sounds were not noticed until one night his father heard strange noises issuing from the floor above. The search that ensued led to the discovery of 7-year-old Handel, clothed only in a nightgown, playing on his beloved spinet, without thought of the cold and darkness. From that night may be said to date his glorious career as a musician. This happened more than 200 years ago. Since then the piano has been improved enormously in every respect. Even the cheapest cottage piano is vastly superior to the spinet of the story, and the imposing grand, with its beautiful finish inside and out, and its full, rich tone, is a thing that Handel could only have dreamed of. Probably very few of the many people who play on pianos realize how great are the skill and care devoted to the manufacture of a high-class instrument. In order that the reader may regard this particular piece of furniture with increased respect, I have included a chapter on the factory of the well-known pianoforte makers, Messrs. John Broadwood and Sons, situated on the banks of the Lee River Canal in the East End of London. The 2 main materials used in the construction of a piano are steel and wood. The first for the pins, wires, and in some instances the frame of the instrument. The second for the case, keys, and works generally. Several kinds of wood are required: pine, oak, beech, mahogany, American poplar, sequoia, rosewood, satinwood, and walnut. The 3 last for veneering the case. On the wharf beside the canal are tall piles of timber which remain exposed to wind, rain, and sun until they have been well seasoned. When any kind of wood is wanted by the workmen, it is transferred to a sawmill, where saws of different forms cut it into suitable sizes. The pieces are neatly stacked on trucks and pushed into drying chambers, where they remain for 6 months, exposed to an average temperature of 140 degrees. The chambers resemble tunnels, long enough to accommodate several trucks. A truck enters at the cooler end and is moved forward, like a cab on a rank, whenever a load of wood is taken out at the exit end, near which the heated air enters. And in this case, a truck is not the sort of tractor-trailer we think of, but more like a cart. When thoroughly dried in this manner, the wood is placed in a large store built in 2 floors above the drying rooms, and remains there until its turn comes to be converted into some part of a piano. Then it undergoes further sawing and passes through planers, whose knives, revolving some thousands of times a minute, whisk off all superfluous matter and leave a smooth surface. This is faced down by a machine which has a large whirling drum covered with sandpaper, against which the board is pressed by rollers. There are some 12,000 separate parts in a broadwood grand, many of them glued together in groups to form a larger part. We may first give our attention to the case. One side and one end of this and the cover of the keyboard have to be bent. This is done by steaming them and pressing them in wooden molds. The case is usually made of white wood, covered with a veneer of rosewood, mahogany, or walnut. In England, the first stands foremost in popular favor, while walnut is preferred by Australians. The reader probably knows that veneering consists of gluing a very thin slice of valuable wood on the surface of a common wood. In the veneer store are piles of these thin sheets, which have been sliced lengthways off logs by parallel saws, or peeled off the circumference of a log turning in a lathe, the cutting tool of which approaches nearer to the center at every revolution. Many of the veneer sheets have holes in them. These are filled in by a skilled workman who inserts pieces of the same veneer of equal tone and color and pastes glued paper slips over the joints, so cunningly made as to be almost invisible. He then glues the wood to be treated, lays the veneer on it, and a sheet of hot zinc on the veneer, and places the whole in a press. When the first layer of veneer is thoroughly dry, a second is glued onto it across the grain, so that each may prevent the other from curling away from the wood. The surface of the outer veneer then undergoes a good rubbing in a very ingenious machine, the chief feature of which is a belt of fine sandpaper running round a couple of pulleys outside a belt of thin steel. The surface to be rubbed is moved backwards and forwards mechanically from north to south, as it were, and the attendant, by means of a lever, can press the belt, running from east to west, down at any point onto the veneer beneath. This is one of the 2 machines of the kind at work in England. If you rub your finger over the finished surface, it feels as smooth as a sheet of notepaper. The most important large piece of woodwork in a piano is the sounding board. In many ways this resembles the upper surface of a violin, but it differs in that it has to withstand the oblique strain, not of 4 light catgut strings, but of some 200-odd steel wires. It must therefore be very strong. The most suitable material for its construction is Swiss fir, the familiar Christmas tree. A number of boards of this wood, about 3 inches broad and 1/4 inch thick, are glued together by their edges to form a large sheet. Upon the upper surface of the sounding board are fixed the bridges over which the strings are stretched, and to the underside are glued a series of parallel ribs of wood kept in position while drying by rows of sticks jammed between them and the ceiling. The steel frame, shaped somewhat like a harp, bears the longitudinal pull of the strings, amounting to 30 tons in some pianos. A large barless frame weighs about 500 weight. Along the edge nearest the keyboard, a number of holes are bored for the rest pins, corresponding to the tuning pegs in a violin, to pass through to the rest plank beneath, which is supported by the frame. In spite of a host of rival mechanical inventions, the tapering rest pin, with a square upper end to fit the tuner's key, still holds its own in pianoforte making. But its efficiency depends entirely upon the care with which the holes for the pins are made in the rest plank. The workman uses no fewer than 6 boring tools of slightly different diameter, and decides by the feel of the wood which of the set he ought to select. If the plank is hard, he employs the largest drill; if soft, a smaller one, because the pin will expand the hole a trifle. A properly fitted pin never slips, though the least pull it has to withstand is 300 pounds. The strings are made of the finest quality of steel, calculated to bear a strain of about 150 tons on a bar 1 inch square in section. In proportion to its diameter, a piano wire is the strongest thing made by human hands, and if you range through all nature, only certain kinds of spiders' webs excel it in this respect. Trichord pianos have 3 strings tuned in unison to each of the treble notes, and 2 or 1 to each of the bass notes. Strings of deep pitch are spun, that is, wrapped round with fine copper wire, to increase their weight and reduce the rapidity of vibration. The case of our piano having been completed, and provided with the sounding board and strings, it is handed over to the finishers, who fit in the action, the technical name for the ivory keys, hammers, and their connecting mechanisms. You may think that the keys are made separately, but this would be a very slow process and render it rather difficult to get the keys of a uniform size. What actually happens is this. The workman planes a plank till it has the sectional shape of a white key, veneers the front and back edges, and after marking it off by transverse lines into as many divisions as there will be keys, cuts out the spaces for the black notes, and cuts it across along the marks. The keys are then entrusted to other workmen, who glue to their top surfaces thin slips of ivory bleached to perfect whiteness. Up to the present time, no satisfactory substitute for this costly material has been found, but hopes are entertained that a certain substance made from milk curds will prove efficient. The covering of the hammerheads with felt is an operation which demands a great deal of practice. The felt must decrease in thickness from the bass to the treble end of the keyboard, and since on its due proportioning largely depends the tone of the instrument, a hammer coverer has a very responsible task to perform. He works on the same principle as the keymaker. The hammerheads are made out of a tapering bar of wood, along one edge of which is glued a strip of felt, which also tapers from end to end, and from the center toward the edges. This felt is very expensive and requires careful cutting. When the glue has set, the felt is divided up into hammerheads by a knife. The completely assembled piano is polished by skilled workmen until its outer surfaces have a glass-like smoothness. It now only remains to adjust the action perfectly and tune the strings. The first process is effected by means of thin paper rings slipped over the pin which projects from the keyboard up into a slot near the outer end of the key. When the proper number of rings are on the pin, the hammer moved by the key will fall away from its strings the correct distance after striking. The last stage of all, the tuning, requires the services of assistants whose ears have been educated by years of practice. Tuners are preferably drawn from choir schools at the age of 14, as the musical training previously received enables them to become efficient more quickly. The visitor, watching a tuner at work in a room where a number of pianos are being treated, wonders how he manages to concentrate his attention on the sounds of his own instrument. From the tuner, the piano goes to the showroom, where a specimen of exceptional magnificence may sometimes be seen. Hundreds of pounds are often spent on the ornamentation of a modern pianoforte after the designs of a prominent artist. In describing the growth of an instrument in its passage through the works, it has been necessary to omit many of the branches of the trade, all of which are of interest by reason of the great variety of the methods employed and the ability of the mechanics who carry them out. Few, if any, manufactures combine so many trades, all needful for the production of the finished article, as does the making of a piano. It is difficult, except by actual inspection, to realize what a number of hands the instrument passes through during its gradual conversion from the raw materials. The whole factory is arranged on carefully planned lines, so that there may be no confusion or waste of time. The various parts of a piano are brought together just in the right place and at the right moment. It should here be mentioned that in addition to the numerous joinery shops are several devoted to the manufacture of small metal parts, such as springs, hinges, and rods. The large quantities of sawdust, chips, and shavings necessarily produced in a large woodworking factory find a use here. They are drawn by air suction through large pipes to the engine room, where a fan flings them into the furnace of a boiler that raises part of the steam consumed by several powerful engines, busily generating electric power for distribution over the works. In this manner is effected a great reduction of the annual coal bill, while the workshops are kept free from accumulations of rubbish. And that's the end. That was a very short chapter. So this is the chapter about a mineral water factory. What mineral waters are composed of: making the gas, bottling, the pressure of gas in a bottle, filling siphons, I had often wondered how bottles and siphons of soda water and lemonade were filled, and having heard that the machinery used was ingenious, I made a journey to a big mineral water factory at Camberwell to see the whole process of mineral water manufacture. The sight of thousands upon thousands of the familiar wooden cases used for holding dozens of bottles, stacked tier above tier in the yard outside the factory, suggested that the output must be very large, and I learnt that 2,000 gross represents one day's work when the weather is warm and the demand for such drinks is brisk. This factory is but one of a large number owned by the same firm. Soda water is pure water charged with carbonic acid gas. Lemonade has a sweet syrup added to the water. And we may say that other drinks of the same class all contain carbonic acid gas as their fizzy element. At one corner of the premises is the gas-making plant. The generators are 4 large cylindrical chambers of oak, in which is placed a quantity of whitening, powdered chalk, and sulfuric acid. Agitators driven by steam revolve inside the chambers and mix the two materials together. The oxygen of the acid unites with the carbon of the chalk and forms carbon dioxide, known chemically as CO2, consisting of 2 atoms of oxygen to 1 of carbon in the molecule, which, after passing through a purifier, ascends to a gasometer to be stored for use. Underground pipes lead the gas into the bottling room. At one end is a row of pumps, each of which has 2 supply pipes, one from the gas main, the other from the water main. By means of taps, the proportion of gas and water is regulated. The mixture is forced into a cylindrical chamber, whence the pressure drives it to the bottling machines. There are dozens of these, each presided over by a bustling employee, who seizes an empty bottle with the stopper in position and places it in the machine. The stopper is automatically unscrewed, and a charge of gas-laden water is forced in. Syrup is added in the case of lemonade or other flavored beverages, and the stopper is replaced. The operation is completed in a very short time. An expert girl will pass 40 gross of bottles through the machine in a day. The gas pressure in a soda water bottle is 100 pounds to 120 pounds to the square inch, and in a lemonade bottle about 80 pounds, so the bottles have to be thick and heavy. Every now and then a loud report is heard, as a stopper flies out or a bottle bursts, and you understand why the women wear masks and the door of the bottling machine is closed while a bottle is being charged. A different type of machine is used for filling siphons. The siphon is placed on its head in a socket, and when the employee pushes a lever down, an arm rises and opens the valve of the siphon by depressing a little valve lever. Then in rushes the charge through the nozzle, and the moment the siphon is full, the valve is closed. So that's 2 chapters of how it's made, learning about 2 extremely different things, bottled mineral water and pianos. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do hit the like button. And I will be back next time with more Sleepy Time reading. Bye-bye.